Hi, I'm Sarah, and I used to believe that loyalty was earned through years of shared secrets, endless laughter, and unwavering support. I thought 15 years of friendship meant something sacred, unbreakable. I was wrong. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back, and the moment you finally see their true face, everything you thought you knew crumbles like a house of cards in a hurricane. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over Cedar Falls, Oregon, turning our backyard into a golden paradise that felt almost too perfect to be real. The string lights I'd spent hours hanging between the oak trees swayed gently in the warm breeze, casting dancing shadows across the freshly mowed lawn. The scent of barbecue smoke mingled with the sweet fragrance of the jasmine climbing our back fence, creating an intoxicating cocktail of summer contentment. Everything was exactly as I dreamed it would be for our 5th wedding anniversary party. I stood at the kitchen window, wiping my hands on a dish towel, watching Ryan flip burgers on the grill while our friends laughed and chatted around the patio table. His dark hair caught the sunlight as he threw his head back, genuinely amused by something Kevin was saying. That laugh was one of the things that made me fall in love with him 7 years ago, rich and infectious, the kind that made everyone around him smile without knowing why. Today, wearing his favorite navy polo and those khaki shorts that made his construction worker physique look effortlessly handsome, he looked like the man I'd married, the one who still left little notes in my lunch bag and brought me coffee in bed on weekends. Madison emerged from the bathroom, her reflection catching in the sliding glass door as she approached. Even in the casual setting of a backyard barbecue, she managed to look like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Her honey blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her white sundress hugged her curves in all the right places while somehow maintaining an air of effortless elegance. She'd always had that gift, the ability to make the rest of us feel slightly underdressed without even trying. It was one of the things I'd both admired and envied about my best friend since we were 13 years old. The kitchen was filled with the comfortable chaos of party preparation. Bowls of potato salad and coleslaw crowded the counter alongside platters of fresh fruit, and the anniversary cake I'd special ordered from Sweet Dreams Bakery downtown. The vanilla and strawberry layers were decorated with delicate sugar flowers that matched the real ones I'd arranged in mason jars throughout the house. Everything had to be perfect, because this wasn't just any party. This was our celebration, our milestone, our declaration to the world, that Ryan and I had made it through 5 years of marriage stronger than ever. Ashley Rodriguez bustled in from the living room, her arms full of empty glasses. Her dark curls were escaping from the messy bun she'd thrown together, and there was a slight flush to her cheeks from the heat and excitement. She worked in marketing for one of the local businesses I designed flyers for, and we'd grown close over shared coffee breaks and complaints about demanding clients. Tonight she wore a flowing coral dress that complemented her olive skin tone beautifully. "Sarah, this party is absolutely magical," she gushed, setting the glasses down near the sink. "I can't believe you put all this together while working on the Henderson project. You're like a superhuman party planner." I smiled, feeling a warm flush of pride. The Henderson project had been consuming my life for the past 3 weeks, a complete rebranding package for the largest restaurant chain in town. Between late nights at Pixel and Print and weekend work sessions, I'd barely had time to breathe, let alone plan a party. But Ryan deserved this celebration. We both did. After 5 years of marriage, 2 job changes, 1 miscarriage, and countless smaller challenges, we'd earned the right to celebrate our survival and growth together. "Madison helped with a lot of the decorating," I said, glancing out at my best friend who was now leaning against the patio railing, talking to Chloe Walker. I couldn't have done it without her. It was true. Madison had been invaluable over the past few days, stringing lights, arranging flowers, and helping me choose the perfect playlist that would keep everyone happy. She'd even driven to 3 different stores to find the exact shade of blue napkins I wanted, the ones that matched the hydrangeas looming along our fence. That was Madison, always going above and beyond for the people she cared about. It was one of the many reasons our friendship had lasted through high school drama, college in different states, my wedding, her series of dramatic breakups, and all the ordinary ups and downs of adult life. Ashley grabbed a fresh beer from the cooler and headed back outside, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the satisfaction of a plan coming together perfectly. Through the window, I could see our guests scattered around the yard in comfortable clusters. Kevin Thompson sat at the patio table with Tom, our next-door neighbor, both of them gesturing animatedly as they discussed something that probably involved either sports or home improvement. Mrs. Peterson from across the street had claimed the comfortable wicker chair near the flower beds, looking delighted to be included in a younger crowd's celebration. My sister Jessica sat cross-legged on the grass nearby, entertaining a group with one of her teaching stories, her hands moving expressively as she painted some picture of middle school chaos. The sliding door opened, and Madison stepped inside, bringing with her the sound of laughter and the smell of charcoal. Her cheeks were slightly flushed from the warmth, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Excitement, maybe, or nervous energy. She'd been a little off all day, more animated than usual, touching people's arms when she talked, laughing just a bit too loudly at jokes that weren't particularly funny. "Sarah, you've outdone yourself," she said, reaching for a water bottle from the counter. "This is seriously the party of the year. Everyone's having such a blast." "Thanks, Mads. I'm just happy everyone could make it." I dried my hands and leaned against the counter, finally allowing myself a moment to relax. Ryan seems to be in his element out there. You know how he gets around a grill and a captive audience. Madison laughed, but there was something forced about it, a brittle quality that made me look at her more closely. Her green eyes were bright, almost glittery, and she kept fidgeting with her bracelet, a nervous habit I recognized from our teenage years. "He's definitely the king of the barbecue," she agreed. "All the guys are hanging on his every word about proper meat temperatures and marinade techniques." I smiled, feeling that familiar warmth that came with watching the person you love be genuinely appreciated by others. Ryan had a way of making everyone feel included, whether he was explaining the finer points of grilling or listening intently to someone's story. It was one of his best qualities, that generous attention he gave to people. "I should probably get the dessert ready," I said, glancing at the clock on the microwave. "People are going to want cake soon." "Let me help," Madison offered quickly. "You've been running around all day. When's the last time you actually sat down and enjoyed your own party?" She had a point. I'd been so focused on making sure everything was perfect that I'd barely had time to have a proper conversation with anyone. The hostess trap, my mom always called it, being so busy taking care of everyone else that you forget to take care of yourself. "Maybe in a few minutes," I said. "I just want to make sure the cake looks good when we bring it out. You know how everyone always takes pictures of the anniversary couple cutting the cake." Madison moved closer, reaching for the cake server I'd laid out earlier. As she did, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and something flickered across her face, an expression I'd never seen before. Guilt? Maybe, or fear. It was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, just work stuff," she said quickly, slipping the phone into her dress pocket without checking the message. "You know how it is in real estate. People think houses sell themselves on weekends." I nodded, understanding completely. My own phone had been buzzing intermittently all day with client emails and revision requests. The modern curse of being always accessible, always on call, even during personal celebrations. Outside, the laughter grew louder, and I could hear Ryan's voice rising above the others, probably telling the story about the time he accidentally built a deck 3 inches too short and had to completely start over. It was one of his favorite self-deprecating tales, guaranteed to get a good reaction from anyone who'd ever attempted a home improvement project. "Sounds like he's got them eating out of his hand," Madison said, her voice carrying that strange, forced quality again. "He loves being the center of attention," I replied fondly. "Not in a bad way, just, he genuinely enjoys making people happy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. One of the things I love most about him." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, something shifted in Madison's expression. Something sharp and almost predatory flickered behind her eyes before disappearing so quickly. I wondered if the heat was making me see things that weren't there. "We should probably join the party," she said, straightening up with sudden energy. "Can't have the guests of honor hiding in the kitchen all night." She was right, of course. This was supposed to be our celebration, mine and Ryan's. We should be out there soaking up the love and good wishes of our friends and family. I could worry about dishes and cleanup tomorrow. "Let me just grab the camera," I said, reaching for the digital camera I'd left charging on the counter. "I want to get some good shots before the sun goes down completely." As we headed toward the sliding door, Madison paused, her hand on the handle. "Sarah," she said, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "You know how much your friendship means to me, right? I mean, we've been through everything together." The comment caught me off guard. Madison wasn't usually one for sentimental declarations, especially not out of nowhere like this. She was more the type to show her feelings through actions rather than words. "Of course I do," I said, touched by the unexpected vulnerability in her voice. "You're like a sister to me, Mads. You always have been." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good," she said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure you knew that." We stepped out into the warm evening air, and immediately the sounds of the party enveloped us. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange that would make for perfect photographs. The string lights were starting to become more visible against the gathering dusk, creating exactly the magical atmosphere I'd envisioned. Jessica spotted me first and waved me over to the group gathered near the flower beds. "Sarah, come settle an argument. Chloe thinks your hydrangeas are some kind of special variety, but I swear they're just regular ones that you've somehow convinced to bloom twice as big as they should." I laughed, making my way over to join the conversation. This was exactly what I'd wanted. Friends gathered in our space, comfortable and happy, celebrating something beautiful. The camera felt warm in my hands as I snapped a few candid shots of the group, catching Jessica mid-gesture and Chloe's delighted laugh. "Trade secret," I said, crouching down to examine the blooms in question. "Coffee grounds and Epsom salt. Mom taught me that trick years ago." "I knew it!" Jessica exclaimed triumphantly. "Sarah's been secretly feeding these flowers gourmet coffee while the rest of us are giving ours tap water and hope." The conversation flowed easily from gardening tips to home improvement disasters, to funny stories about Mrs. Peterson's ongoing battle with the raccoons that kept getting into her garbage. I found myself relaxing for the first time all day, finally able to enjoy the fruits of my planning labor. As the group's attention shifted to Kevin's dramatic retelling of his recent kitchen renovation mishap, I glanced around the yard, taking mental pictures of moments I wanted to remember. Ashley and Tyler Grant, Madison's most recent ex-boyfriend, were deep in conversation near the beverage station, both of them laughing at something on his phone. Tom was helping Ryan arrange the meat on a fresh platter, the two of them falling into an easy rhythm that spoke to the comfortable friendship they'd developed since we'd moved to the neighborhood. And Madison stood near the grill, closer to Ryan than was strictly necessary, her hand resting lightly on his arm as she said something that made him smile. There was nothing unusual about it, really. Madison was naturally tactile, always touching people's shoulders when she talked, hugging hello and goodbye, existing in everyone's personal space in a way that felt warm rather than invasive. It was just her way. But something about the scene made me pause, camera halfway to my eye. Maybe it was the way she was standing, angled toward him in a way that excluded everyone else around them. Maybe it was how her fingers lingered on his forearm just a beat longer than necessary. Or maybe it was the expression on her face, intense and focused in a way that seemed inappropriate for whatever casual conversation they were having about grilling techniques. "Earth to Sarah," Jessica's voice cut through my observation. "You're staring like you're taking mental notes for a surveillance report." I laughed, shaking my head to clear the strange thoughts. "Sorry, just thinking about where I want to get pictures before we lose the light completely." "Well, make sure you get some of yourself," Chloe said. "You look absolutely gorgeous today, and you've been behind that camera all afternoon." She was right. I'd been so focused on capturing everyone else's joy that I'd barely appeared in any of the photos myself. The navy dress I'd chosen specifically for tonight was one of my favorites, fitted at the waist with a flowing skirt that moved beautifully when I walked. I'd even taken extra time with my makeup, going for a natural but polished look that would photograph well. "I'll make sure to get some good shots of you and Ryan when you cut the cake," Ashley called out, appearing at my elbow with perfect timing. "Speaking of which, when are we doing that? The anticipation is killing me." I glanced at my watch, surprised to see how quickly the time had passed. "In about 20 minutes, I think. Let me just make sure Ryan's ready." As I approached the grill area, the conversation between Ryan and Madison became clearer. They were discussing the house Madison was trying to sell on Elm Street, the Victorian with the wraparound porch that had been on the market for months. "The problem is everyone wants the charm, but nobody wants to deal with the reality of a 100-year-old electrical system," Madison was saying, her voice carrying that animated quality it got when she was really engaged in a topic. "Have they considered partial renovation?" Ryan asked, turning a row of corn on the cob with practiced precision. "Sometimes you can upgrade the essentials without losing the character." "That's exactly what I told them, but they're worried about costs," Madison replied, moving even closer as she gestured toward the house. "You should come take a look sometime. I'd love to get your professional opinion on what really needs to be done versus what's just cosmetic." There was something in her tone, an underlying invitation that made me pause. But before I could analyze it further, Ryan noticed my approach, and his face lit up with that warm smile that still made my heart skip a beat after all these years. "There's my beautiful wife," he said, setting down his tongs and reaching for me. "Come here, anniversary girl." He pulled me into his arms right there next to the grill, not caring that our friends were watching or that he smelled like charcoal and beer. His kiss was soft and familiar, tasting like summer and celebration and 5 years of shared history. "Having fun?" he murmured against my ear. "The best," I whispered back, meaning it completely. "Thank you for going along with all my party planning craziness." "Are you kidding? This is amazing. You're amazing." He squeezed me tighter before releasing me to tend to the food. "Madison was just telling me about that house on Elm Street. Sounds like a real project." "It is," Madison agreed, but there was something different in her voice now, cooler somehow. "But you know what they say about old houses. They just need the right person to see their potential." I felt a strange chill despite the warm evening air, but before I could examine the feeling, Kevin appeared with fresh drinks for everyone, and the moment passed. "All right, people," Ryan announced, raising his beer bottle. "Food's ready. Let's eat before everything gets cold." The next hour passed in a blur of good food, easy conversation, and the comfortable chaos of friends enjoying themselves. The cake cutting was everything I'd hoped it would be, complete with embarrassing stories from our wedding day and enthusiastic toasts to many more years of happiness. Ashley kept her promise and took dozens of photos, capturing Ryan's surprised laughter when I playfully smeared frosting on his nose, and my delighted shriek when he retaliated. As the evening progressed and the string lights became the primary source of illumination, the party naturally began to wind down. Mrs. Peterson was the first to leave, thanking us profusely for including her and pressing a small wrapped gift into my hands with instructions not to open it until later. Tom and Kevin followed shortly after, both claiming early morning obligations and expressing their appreciation for such a wonderful evening. By 10 o'clock, only our closest friends remained: Jessica, Ashley, Chloe, Tyler, and of course Madison. The conversation had grown quieter, more intimate, the kind of late-night discussion that emerges when good friends have had just enough wine to become philosophical. "I need to use the restroom," I announced, standing up from the patio chair where I'd finally allowed myself to sit and relax. "Madison, can you help me bring in some of these empty dishes while I'm inside?" "Of course," she said, but there was something reluctant in her tone. We gathered an armload of plates and glasses and headed inside, leaving the others to continue their debate about whether the local movie theater's popcorn was worth the outrageous prices they charged. The house felt cool and quiet after the warmth and noise of the party, and I found myself appreciating the brief respite. "You can just set those by the sink," I told Madison as we entered the kitchen. "I'll deal with them tomorrow." She did as I suggested, but didn't immediately head back outside. Instead, she stood by the counter, fidgeting with that bracelet again, her expression troubled. "Sarah," she began, then stopped, shaking her head as if arguing with herself. "What is it?" I asked, concerned by her obvious distress. "You've been acting strange all day. Is everything okay?" She started again, then took a deep breath. "I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. It wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, Madison, you're scaring me, what are you talking about?" Before she could answer, the sliding door opened, and Ryan stepped inside, his face flushed from laughter and beer. "Ladies, we're missing you out there." Ashley's telling that story about her disastrous first date with the guy who took her to his grandmother's funeral. "We'll be right out," I said, but my eyes remained fixed on Madison, trying to understand what she'd been trying to tell me. "Actually," Madison said, her voice suddenly bright and artificial, "I think I should probably head home. Early showing tomorrow." "Don't go yet," Ryan protested, moving closer to where we stood. "The night's still young." As he spoke, he reached around me to grab a beer from the cooler, and in that simple, innocent movement, everything changed. Madison stepped forward at the same moment, ostensibly to get out of his way, but instead of moving aside, she moved toward him. Her hand came up to steady herself against his chest. Her face tilted up toward his, and before I could process what was happening, her lips met his. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stumble or a miscalculation. It was deliberate, intentional, and it lasted long enough for me to see Ryan's moment of shocked paralysis before he jerked backward, his face a mask of horror and confusion. "What the hell, Madison?" he snapped, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, but I barely heard his words. The kitchen had gone completely silent except for the humming of the refrigerator and the distant sound of our friends' laughter drifting in from the patio. Madison stood frozen, her hand still extended from where it had been pressed against Ryan's chest, her face a mixture of defiance and terror. Time seemed suspended, crystallized in that moment of betrayal so pure and shocking that my brain struggled to process it. This was Madison, my best friend since we were 13 years old. Madison, who had been my maid of honor, who had held my hand through my miscarriage, who had helped me plan this very party. Madison, who had just kissed my husband in my own kitchen while our friends celebrated our anniversary in the backyard. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can explain." But I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stand there, my world tilting sideways as 15 years of friendship crumbled to dust around my feet. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about trust, about the people closest to me, disintegrated in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Ryan took a step toward me, his hands outstretched, his face pale with shock. "Sarah, baby, that wasn't... She just... Get out," I said quietly, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Sarah, please," Madison began, tears starting to stream down her cheeks. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." "Get out!" The words exploded from somewhere deep inside me, loud enough that I heard conversation stop on the patio. "Get out of my house! Get out of my life! Get out!" Madison's face crumpled, but she didn't try to argue further. She grabbed her purse from the counter with shaking hands and fled toward the front door. I heard it slam behind her, followed by the sound of her car starting in the driveway. Ryan and I stood in the sudden silence, the weight of what had just happened settling between us like a physical presence. Outside, I could hear Jessica's voice, concerned and questioning, asking if everything was all right. Someone's footsteps approached the sliding door. "What do I tell them?" Ryan asked quietly, his voice hoarse with shock. I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 7 years, married for 5, and felt something inside me shut down completely. Whether he was innocent or not, whether this was Madison's doing entirely or something more complicated, didn't matter right now. What mattered was that everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my closest friendship, had just been revealed as a lie. "Tell them the party's over," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "Tell them whatever you want. I'm going upstairs." I walked out of the kitchen without looking back, leaving Ryan to face our friends and their inevitable questions. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I could hear the murmur of confused voices, the shuffle of people gathering their things. the awkward goodbyes of a celebration that had ended in inexplicable disaster. In the sanctuary of our bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My best friend had kissed my husband. In my house. At my anniversary party. While I stood 3 feet away. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't find the bottom of it. But underneath the hurt, underneath the shock and disbelief, something else was growing. Something cold and calculating and utterly unforgiving. Madison wanted to destroy my marriage, my happiness, my life. Fine. But if she thought I was going to collapse and disappear quietly, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. I walked to my dresser and pulled out my laptop, my fingers surprisingly steady as I opened it. If Madison thought she could kiss my life goodbye with that stunt downstairs, she was about to discover that I could return the favor with interest. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And Madison had just sprinted across the most sacred one of all. Sleep was impossible. I lay in the darkness of our bedroom, staring at the ceiling while Ryan's breathing gradually deepened beside me. He'd tried to talk when he finally came upstairs, his voice raw with exhaustion and confusion, but I'd turned away from him, pulling the covers up to my chin like armor. What was there to say? What words could possibly address the crater that had opened up in the center of my life? The digital clock on the nightstand glowed accusingly. 2:47 a.m. Outside, Cedar Falls had settled into the deep quiet of a small-town night, broken only by the occasional car passing on our street, and the distant hum of the highway that connected us to the larger world beyond. The remnants of our anniversary party lingered in the air, the faint smell of barbecue smoke drifting through the open window, the memory of laughter that now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. I slipped out of bed carefully, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Ryan didn't stir. The events of the evening had drained him too, left him looking older somehow, the lines around his eyes more pronounced when he'd finally fallen asleep. Whether from guilt or shock, I couldn't tell anymore. The certainty I'd felt about my husband, about my marriage, had evaporated the moment Madison's lips touched his. Downstairs, the kitchen still bore traces of our celebration. I'd managed to load most of the dishes into the dishwasher before retreating upstairs, but wine glasses sat abandoned on the counter, and the anniversary cake remained half-eaten on its crystal stand. The string lights in the backyard cast soft geometric patterns through the sliding glass door, creating shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits. I made coffee despite the late hour, needing something to do with my hands, something normal and routine to anchor me while my mind spun in chaotic circles. The familiar ritual of measuring grounds and adding water felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else go through the motions of domestic life while my own world lay in ruins. As the coffee maker gurgled to life, I found myself staring at my phone, Madison's contact information glowing on the screen. 15 years of friendship condensed into a digital record. Thousands of text messages, shared photos, inside jokes, late-night conversations about everything and nothing. My thumb hovered over her name, muscle memory almost strong enough to overcome rational thought. How many times had I called her after a fight with Ryan, seeking comfort and perspective? How many times had she been the first person I wanted to share good news with? But tonight, looking at her name on my phone felt like staring at a stranger. Madison Brooks, real estate agent. When had she become so formal in my contacts? I remembered now. She'd insisted I update her information when she'd gotten her license, claiming it was important for her professional image. Such a small thing, but now it felt symbolic somehow, as if she'd been creating distance between us long before tonight. The coffee finished brewing and I poured myself a mug, the steam rising like incense in the quiet kitchen. My laptop sat on the counter where I'd left it earlier, and almost without conscious thought, I opened it and navigated to Facebook. Madison's profile appeared immediately, her smiling face looking back at me from the profile picture we'd taken together at last year's wine festival. We looked so happy, arms wrapped around each other, faces flushed with laughter and celebration. When had that picture been taken? September, maybe? Just a few months after. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Last summer's neighborhood barbecue at the Hendersons' house. I'd been called into work unexpectedly. a client emergency that couldn't wait until Monday. Ryan had gone without me, and Madison had offered to keep him company since Tyler was out of town on business. I'd been grateful at the time, touched that my best friend would sacrifice her Saturday evening to make sure my husband didn't feel awkward at a couples event. But now, scrolling through Madison's photos from that night, I saw things I'd missed before. There was Ryan in the background of several shots, and in every single one, Madison was positioned near him. Not obviously, not in a way that would have raised immediate red flags, but consistently. Subtly. In one photo, taken by someone else and tagged later, Madison's hand rested on Ryan's shoulder as they shared some joke. Her body language was relaxed, familiar, intimate in a way that I'd dismissed as normal friendship at the time. I scrolled further back, my coffee growing cold as I traveled through months of social media history. The Henderson barbecue wasn't an isolated incident. There was the photo from Ashley's birthday party in March, where Madison and Ryan were caught in animated conversation in the corner while I'd been helping with cleanup. The group shot from our Valentine's Day dinner at Romano's, where Madison had somehow ended up seated directly across from Ryan despite the fact that she'd been the last to arrive. The casual snapshot from our New Year's Eve gathering, where Madison's gaze was fixed not on the camera but on my husband. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind to what was happening right in front of me? I opened a new browser tab and logged into my Instagram account, driven by a need to dig deeper, to understand the scope of what I'd failed to see. Madison's posts from the past year told a story I'd been too trusting to read properly. There were subtle changes in her content, a shift from the typical real estate promotional posts and friend group photos to more personal, almost intimate glimpses of her life. Photos of coffee shops where she and Ryan had discussed that Elm Street house. Pictures of hiking trails they'd both mentioned visiting. Even a shot of her reading the same book Ryan had recommended to me just last month. My hands trembled as I clicked through post after post, each one adding another piece to a puzzle I'd never realized existed. There was a check-in at Murphy's Hardware from 3 weeks ago, the same day Ryan had gone there to buy supplies for our backyard lighting project. A photo of her lunch at the construction site cafe where Ryan's crew often ate, posted the same day he'd mentioned running into her during his break. Even a picture of her car at the grocery store, where Ryan always stopped after work, captioned with some joke about weekend errands. The coffee in my mug had gone stone cold, but I couldn't stop scrolling. Couldn't stop connecting dots that painted a picture of systematic, deliberate pursuit. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or a sudden attraction that had overwhelmed better judgment. This was a campaign. I closed the laptop with shaking hands and sat in the darkness, letting the weight of my discovery settle over me like a heavy blanket. Madison hadn't just kissed my husband at our anniversary party. She'd been circling him for months, creating opportunities for connection, building intimacy through shared spaces and manufactured coincidences. The kiss wasn't the beginning of her betrayal. It was the culmination of it. My phone buzzed against the counter, the sound sharp and startling in the quiet kitchen. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Madison, finally ready to offer the explanation she'd promised in those frantic moments after the kiss. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "I saw what happened tonight. We need to talk. Tyler Grant, Madison's most recent ex-boyfriend, the one who'd been at the party earlier, charming and friendly as always. Why was he texting me at 3 in the morning? And what did he mean? He'd seen what happened." The kiss had occurred inside the house, away from the other guests. I stared at the message for several minutes before typing back, "What do you mean?" His response came quickly, as if he'd been waiting by his phone. "Not over text. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? There are things you need to know about Madison, things I should have told you months ago." A chill ran down my spine. Tyler knew something, had known something for months. How many people had seen what I'd missed? How many of our friends had watched Madison pursue my husband while I remained obliviously grateful for her friendship? I typed back, "Hideaway Cafe, 10 a.m. See you then? And Sarah? I'm sorry, you deserved better than this." I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the spinning sensation that threatened to overwhelm me. Tomorrow, I would learn whatever Tyler had been keeping to himself. Tonight, I needed to process what I'd already discovered, to trace back through the months and years of friendship, and find the exact moment when Madison had stopped being my ally and started being my competition. The anniversary cake still sat on the counter, its cheerful decorations now seeming almost mocking in the early morning light filtering through the windows. I'd been so proud of that cake, so excited to share it with the people who mattered most to us. Now it felt like evidence of my own naivety, my pathetic belief that love and loyalty were constants, rather than variables subject to change without notice. I cut myself a small piece and ate it standing at the counter, the sweet frosting coating my tongue like sugar-coated lies. 5 years of marriage. 15 years of friendship. All of it built on a foundation that had been slowly eroding while I'd been too busy living my life to notice the cracks. The house began to stir around me as dawn approached. I could hear Ryan moving upstairs, the creak of floorboards as he headed to the bathroom. Soon he would come downstairs, and we would have to navigate the awkward morning after of a marriage that had been publicly humiliated at its own celebration. What did you say to your spouse when your best friend had kissed them in front of you? How did you rebuild trust when you weren't even sure if it had been betrayed or simply violated by someone else's actions? I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Ryan was in the shower, steam escaping from under the bathroom door, and I could hear him moving around with the careful quietness of someone trying not to wake a sleeping spouse. Too late for that consideration. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the framed wedding photo on my nightstand. We looked so young in that picture, so certain that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. Madison had been just outside the frame of that shot, I remembered, helping to arrange my dress and making sure my bouquet looked perfect. She'd been the one to suggest the photographer capture that particular moment. The intimate look between Ryan and me as we exchanged private jokes during the formal photo session. Had she been jealous even then? Had she stood there watching us promise to love each other forever, while harboring feelings she would later act on? Or had her attraction to Ryan developed slowly, growing stronger as she watched our marriage from the inside, learning his habits and preferences and vulnerabilities through my own innocent sharing? The bathroom door opened, and Ryan emerged in a cloud of steam, a towel wrapped around his waist. He stopped when he saw me sitting there, his expression cautious and uncertain. "You're awake," he said softly. "I was trying not to disturb you." "I never went to sleep," I replied, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. He sat down on his side of the bed, maintaining careful distance between us. "Sarah, about last night." "Tyler wants to meet me for coffee this morning," I interrupted. "He says there are things I need to know about Madison, things he should have told me months ago." Ryan's face went pale. "What kind of things?" "I don't know yet, but I've been thinking about it all night, going through social media, looking at photos, and Ryan, this wasn't sudden. This wasn't just a moment of poor judgment at our party. I think she's been pursuing you for months." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I was imagining it. The words hit me like a slap. "You knew?" "Not knew, exactly. But there were moments. Times when she would text me directly instead of going through you, or show up places where she knew I'd be. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was just being friendly. You two were so close, and I didn't want to create problems over something that might have been completely innocent." "When?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "When did it start?" "Spring, maybe. Around the time she broke up with Tyler, she started asking me to look at houses with her, saying she valued my opinion on structural issues. Then there were the coincidental meetings at lunch spots, the texts about work stuff that seemed to require in-person discussions. I kept meaning to talk to you about it, but every time I tried, it seemed like I would be making something out of nothing." I stared at him, this man I'd shared my life with for 7 years, and felt the ground shift beneath me once again. "You should have told me." "I know. God, Sarah, I know. I should have trusted my instincts instead of trying to protect your friendship. But Madison has been in your life longer than I have. I didn't want to be the husband who came between you and your best friend over what might have been innocent behavior." His reasoning made sense, and that somehow made it worse. I could understand his reluctance to interfere with a friendship that predated our relationship. I could even understand his desire to give Madison the benefit of the doubt. But his silence had left me vulnerable, unaware that my marriage was under attack, while I continued to confide in the very person who was trying to destroy it. "I need to shower," I said, standing up abruptly. "And then I need to go hear what Tyler has to say." "Sarah, wait." Ryan stood too, reaching for my hand. "Where does this leave us? I mean, what happens now?" I looked down at our joined hands, his fingers warm and familiar against mine. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need to understand what's been happening before I can figure out how to move forward." He nodded, releasing my hand reluctantly. "Will you? Can you tell me what Tyler says? I think I need to know too." "Maybe," I said, heading toward the bathroom. "We'll see." The hot water felt like absolution, washing away the sticky residue of the previous night's revelations. I stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting the heat penetrate muscles that had been tense for hours. When I finally emerged, Ryan had left for his early Saturday job site, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter. "Take all the time you need. I love you." I stared at those 4 words for a long time, trying to feel their truth. Love hadn't been enough to prevent last night's disaster. Love hadn't made Ryan confide in me about Madison's increasing attention. Love hadn't opened my eyes to what was happening in my own life. What good was love if it left you blind and vulnerable to betrayal? By 9:30, I was dressed and ready to face whatever truth Tyler had been carrying. The Hideaway Cafe sat on Main Street, its cheerful yellow facade and hand-painted sign a stark contrast to the dark conversation that awaited me inside. I'd chosen a table in the back corner, away from the Saturday morning crowd of families and joggers getting their caffeine fix. Tyler arrived exactly on time, his usually easy smile replaced by an expression of grim determination. He looked like he'd slept about as well as I had, his dark hair disheveled and shadows under his eyes. He ordered a black coffee and sat down across from me, his hands wrapped around the mug as if seeking warmth on the warm summer morning. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "Tyler, what do you know?" I asked directly, too exhausted for small talk. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for an unpleasant task. "Madison and I broke up 3 months ago. Officially, it was mutual. We wanted different things, growing apart, all the usual reasons. But the truth is, I ended it because I caught her cheating." The words hit me like cold water. "Cheating? With who?" "A married client. Some guy whose wife was out of town while he was house hunting. I found texts between them, explicit ones, and when I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. Said it wasn't serious, just physical, that it didn't mean anything because he was never going to leave his wife anyway." I stared at Tyler, processing this new information. Madison had always been flirtatious, charming, comfortable with men in a way I'd envied. But cheating? Pursuing married men? "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because she begged me not to. Said it would ruin her reputation in a small town, destroy her business. She promised it was over, that it had been a mistake, that she would never do anything like that again. And like an idiot, I believed her. I thought if we broke up quietly, she would learn from it and move on." Tyler took a long sip of his coffee, his hands trembling slightly. But it didn't stop. "After we broke up, I started noticing things. She would mention running into Ryan places, always with some perfectly reasonable explanation. She started asking mutual friends about your marriage, subtle questions about whether you guys were happy, whether Ryan seemed satisfied. At first, I thought she was just processing our breakup by looking at other couples, trying to understand what she wanted in a relationship." "But then," I prompted, though I was beginning to guess where this was heading. "Then I saw her at Murphy's Hardware 2 weeks ago, flirting with Ryan while he was picking up supplies. She was laughing, touching his arm, standing way too close. And the look on her face, it was the same one she'd had with the married client. Predatory, calculating." The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I couldn't seem to let go of the mug. "You should have told me then." "I know, I started to, a dozen times. But what was I going to say? That my ex-girlfriend was flirting with your husband? Based on what, body language and a feeling? You would have thought I was being vindictive, trying to cause problems because I was bitter about our breakup. Tyler leaned forward, his expression earnest and desperate. Sarah, I never thought she would actually do anything. I thought maybe she was just testing her power, seeing if she could get his attention. I never imagined she would be bold enough to actually kiss him, especially at your anniversary party. When I saw you guys go inside together, I had a bad feeling, but by the time I figured out I should check on you, it was too late. I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands. You saw us go inside? I saw Madison follow you and Ryan into the house. She had this look on her face, like she was psyching herself up for something. And when she came running out a few minutes later, crying, and then Ryan came out looking like he'd seen a ghost, I knew she'd finally made her move. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that was both clearer and more devastating than I'd imagined. Madison hadn't just been attracted to my husband. She'd been systematically pursuing him as part of a pattern of behavior that included targeting married men. I'd been so focused on the betrayal of our friendship that I'd missed the larger truth. Madison was a predator, and I'd never even realized I was housing a wolf. There's something else, Tyler said, his voice dropping even lower. The night before your party, Madison came to see me. She was drunk, emotional, talking about how she was tired of watching other people have what she wanted. She said she was done being the supportive friend, done helping other people live perfect lives while hers fell apart. She said it was time to take what she deserved. And you didn't think to warn me? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but the betrayal felt fresh and raw. I thought she was just drunk and feeling sorry for herself. Madison always got dramatic when she drank too much. I told her to go home, sleep it off, and stop wallowing in self-pity. I never thought... God, Sarah, if I'd known what she was planning, I would have called you immediately. Tyler reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't put the pieces together sooner. I should have protected you from this. I pulled my hand back, not unkindly, but needing space to process everything he'd told me. Madison's pursuit of Ryan wasn't just about wanting my husband. It was about wanting my life, my happiness, my stability. She'd watched me build something beautiful and decided she deserved it more than I did. What are you gonna do? Tyler asked softly. I looked out the cafe window at the peaceful Saturday morning scene on Main Street. Families walked by with strollers, couples held hands over iced coffees, teenagers laughed as they headed toward the park. Normal life continuing while mine lay in pieces, but for the first time since last night, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt anger, clean and sharp and purposeful. I'm going to make sure she never does this to anyone else, I said quietly. Tyler nodded slowly. If you need anything, any evidence or testimony about her pattern of behavior, I'll help. What she did to you, to Ryan, to your marriage, it's not okay. Someone needs to hold her accountable. I stood up, leaving money on the table for my untouched coffee. Thank you for telling me the truth, even if it was later than it should have been. Sarah, Tyler called as I headed toward the door. For what it's worth, Ryan didn't encourage her. Every time I saw them together, he seemed uncomfortable, like he was trying to maintain politeness without encouraging her attention. I don't think he realized how serious her pursuit was until last night. I nodded without turning around. Whether Ryan was innocent or complicit was a question I'd have to answer separately. Right now, I had a more pressing concern: making sure Madison Brooks learned that there were consequences for destroying other people's lives. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text message. Madison's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, my finger hovered over the delete button. Instead, I opened it. Sarah, please let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. I was drunk and confused, and I made a terrible mistake. Our friendship means everything to me. Please don't throw away 15 years over one stupid moment. I love you like a sister. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it twice, 3 times, letting each word sink in. Even now, even after being caught red-handed, Madison was lying. Minimizing. Trying to manipulate me into forgiveness by appealing to our shared history. But Tyler's revelations had shown me the truth. There was no drunk confusion, no stupid moment of poor judgment. There was only Madison Brooks, serial destroyer of marriages, who had decided my happiness was standing in the way of her own and had acted accordingly. I deleted the message without responding and drove home through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls. Ryan's truck was in the driveway, and I could see him through the kitchen window, probably cleaning up the last remnants of our anniversary party. He looked up when I entered, his expression hopeful and worried in equal measure. "How did it go?" he asked. I sat down at the kitchen table and told him everything Tyler had shared, watching his face grow paler with each detail. When I finished, we sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of Madison's betrayal settling between us like a living thing. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked finally. I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 7 years, and felt something crystallize inside me. Madison had tried to destroy our marriage, but she'd underestimated both my resolve and my capacity for strategic thinking. She wanted to play games with people's lives? Fine. But she was about to discover that some games had consequences she'd never imagined. "Now," I said, opening my laptop, "we make sure she never hurts anyone else again." The laptop screen glowed in the afternoon sunlight streaming through our kitchen window as I opened a fresh document and began typing. Ryan sat across from me, nursing his third cup of coffee and watching my fingers move across the keyboard with the focused intensity I usually reserved for client deadlines. "What are you writing?" he asked quietly. "A timeline," I replied without looking up. "Every interaction Madison had with you that I can remember. Every coincidence, every time she showed up somewhere she shouldn't have been. If we're going to expose her pattern of behavior, we need documentation." The words flowed faster than I'd expected, muscle memory taking over as I organized information the same way I would for a marketing campaign. Dates, locations, witnesses, photographic evidence. Madison had made one crucial mistake in her pursuit of my husband. She'd been sloppy about covering her digital tracks. Every social media post, every check-in, every tagged photo had created a breadcrumb trail that I was now methodically following backward through time. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair as I typed. "Sarah, are you sure about this? I mean, what she did was horrible, but destroying her life seems what?" I looked up from the screen, my voice colder than I'd intended. "Fair? Proportionate? She tried to destroy our marriage, Ryan. She's been systematically pursuing you for months, while pretending to be my best friend. And according to Tyler, we're not her first victims. She has a pattern of targeting married men." "I know, but nothing." I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing the document I'd been creating. "Look at this timeline. Look at how calculated this was. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a drunken mistake. This was a campaign." Ryan leaned forward, his eyes scanning the entries I'd compiled. March 15th. Madison texts Ryan directly about Elm Street house inspection, doesn't mention conversation to Sarah until 3 days later. March 22nd. Madison coincidentally at Murphy's Hardware same day Ryan, shopping for anniversary party supplies. April 3rd. Madison posts Instagram photo from construction site cafe with caption about unexpected lunch companions on day Ryan mentioned running into her. The list went on for pages, each entry documenting another instance of Madison inserting herself into Ryan's routine, creating opportunities for private interaction, building familiarity and intimacy through manufactured coincidences. Viewed individually, each incident seemed innocent enough. Compiled together, they revealed the methodical nature of her pursuit. "My God," Ryan whispered, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't realize how orchestrated it all was." "She's good at what she does," I said grimly. "She knows how to make her target feel like the aggressor, like they're the ones creating the connection. That's probably how she justifies it to herself. She's not pursuing married men. She's simply making herself available for them to pursue her." I closed the laptop and stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked our backyard. The string lights from last night's party still hung between the trees, but now they looked forlorn and forgotten, like decorations for a celebration that had happened years ago, instead of hours. The anniversary cake sat in the refrigerator, its cheerful decorations hidden behind a closed door. "I need to call Jessica," I said, reaching for my phone. "She works in the school system. She'll know how to handle this kind of documentation for maximum impact." My sister answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the satisfaction of a successful Saturday morning. "Hey, I was just thinking about calling you. Last night was such a wonderful party, although I have to say the ending was pretty abrupt. Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for a conversation I'd been dreading. "Jess, I need your help with something. It's about Madison." The brightness in her voice dimmed immediately. "What about Madison?" "She kissed Ryan last night. In our kitchen, while I was standing right there. And I've discovered it wasn't a spontaneous mistake. She's been pursuing him for months." Silence stretched across the phone line for so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. When Jessica finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled, the tone she used when dealing with problem students and difficult parents. "Tell me everything." I walked Jessica through the events of the previous night, Tyler's revelations, and my own discoveries about Madison's social media behavior. With each detail, I could hear my sister's breathing grow more controlled, more focused. Jessica had always been the pragmatic one in our family, the problem solver who approached crises with methodical precision. "You're right to document everything," she said when I finished. "But Sarah, you need to be careful about how you proceed. If you're planning to expose her publicly, you need to make sure every piece of evidence is bulletproof. Madison has a lot of friends in this town, and she's very good at playing the victim when it suits her." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Madison Brooks is not as well liked as you think she is. She's charming and friendly on the surface, but there have been rumors, whispered conversations about her behavior at real estate events, complaints from other agents about her methods. Nothing concrete enough to act on, but enough to make people uncomfortable." This was news to me. In all my years of friendship with Madison, I'd never heard anything but praise for her professional success and personal charm. "What kind of rumors?" "Inappropriate relationships with clients, mostly. Crossing professional boundaries. Some of the older agents have started warning newcomers about her, telling them to be careful about showing houses alone with certain male clients if Madison has worked with them first." I felt a chill run down my spine. Madison's pattern of targeting married men wasn't limited to my social circle. It was affecting her professional life as well, creating ripples throughout the small real estate community in Cedar Falls. "Jessica, I need you to help me compile evidence that will stand up to scrutiny. Not just social media posts and timelines, but testimony from people who've witnessed her behavior. Will you help me?" "Of course I will. But Sarah, what's your end game here? What exactly are you trying to accomplish?" I stared out at the remnants of our anniversary party, feeling something hard and unforgiving crystallize in my chest. "I want to make sure she never does this to anyone else. I want her pattern of behavior exposed so thoroughly that no married man in this town will be naive enough to fall for her manipulation. And I want everyone who knows both of us to understand exactly what kind of person she really is." "Okay," Jessica said slowly. "That's a big undertaking. You'll need more than just evidence of her pursuing Ryan. You'll need to establish a pattern that goes beyond one incident. Tyler mentioned other married men. He specifically said there was a client she was having an affair with. If we can identify him, maybe he'll be willing to come forward. Maybe. Or maybe he'll deny everything to protect his own marriage. Sarah, you need to be prepared for the possibility that this could get ugly. Madison isn't going to accept exposure quietly. She'll fight back, and she'll fight dirty." I thought about Madison's text message that morning, the carefully crafted appeal to our friendship and shared history. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative, still attempting to minimize her actions and shift responsibility away from herself. "Let her fight," I said quietly. "I'm not the same person I was yesterday. Yesterday, I would have believed her lies and forgiven her, because I valued our friendship more than my own dignity. Today, I know exactly what she is, and I'm not going to let her destroy anyone else the way she tried to destroy me." After ending the call with Jessica, I returned to my laptop and began a new document. This one wasn't a timeline of Madison's pursuit of Ryan. This was a comprehensive investigation plan, broken down into phases and objectives like the marketing campaigns I developed for my most challenging clients. Phase 1. Document the current situation. Compile all existing evidence of Madison's inappropriate behavior toward Ryan, including social media posts, text messages, witness testimony, and photographic evidence. Create a clear timeline that establishes her pattern of pursuit. Phase 2. Investigate her history. Research Madison's past relationships and professional interactions to identify other instances of similar behavior. Interview witnesses who might have observed inappropriate conduct. Gather evidence of her pattern of targeting married men. Phase 3. Build a coalition. Identify allies who have witnessed Madison's behavior or who have been affected by it. Create a support network of people willing to testify to her character and actions. Establish credibility through multiple independent sources. Phase 4. Strategic disclosure. Choose the most effective method and timing for exposing Madison's behavior. Consider professional consequences through the real estate board, social consequences through community networks, and legal consequences if applicable. Ryan read over my shoulder as I typed, his expression growing more concerned with each phase of the plan. "Sarah, this is really comprehensive. Are you sure you want to go this far?" I saved the document and closed the laptop, turning to face him fully. "Ryan, what Madison did last night wasn't just about kissing you. It was about destroying our marriage so she could step into my place. She's been planning this for months, creating opportunities to bond with you, learning your schedule and preferences, positioning herself as an alternative to me. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated attack on our life together. I understand that, but do you?" I interrupted, "because I'm not sure you do. Madison didn't just betray our friendship. She violated the trust of our entire social circle. She manipulated community events and mutual friendships to create access to you. She used information I shared with her in confidence to better understand how to appeal to you. She turned every kindness I showed her into a weapon to use against me." Ryan was quiet for a long moment, processing my words. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to write down every interaction you can remember having with Madison over the past year. Every text message, every phone call, every time she showed up somewhere unexpectedly. I need you to be completely honest about times when you felt uncomfortable or when her behavior seemed inappropriate, even if you dismissed those feelings at the time. And then we're going to methodically dismantle the reputation she's built in this community. We're going to expose her for exactly what she is, a predator who targets stable marriages and destroys families for her own gratification." That evening, I drove to Ashley Rodriguez's apartment complex, a converted Victorian house downtown that had been divided into trendy units for young professionals. Ashley lived on the second floor, her space filled with vibrant artwork and plants that somehow thrived despite the limited natural light. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Sarah, I wasn't expecting you. Come in, come in. Do you want some wine?" I was just watching terrible reality TV and judging other people's life choices. Ashley's living room was cozy and welcoming, with a comfortable couch positioned perfectly for television viewing and a coffee table covered with marketing portfolios and color swatches from her latest project. She poured 2 glasses of red wine and settled onto the couch beside me, her expression shifting from casual friendliness to concern as she noticed my serious demeanor. "Okay, what's going on? You look like someone just told you your favorite restaurant is closing." I took a sip of wine, gathering my courage for another difficult conversation. "Ashley, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever noticed anything unusual about Madison's behavior around married men?" Ashley's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. "That's a very specific question. Why are you asking?" "Because last night, after most of the guests had left, Madison kissed Ryan in our kitchen while I was standing 3 feet away." "She what?" Ashley set down her wineglass with enough force to slosh the contents. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. And I've discovered it wasn't a spontaneous mistake. She's been pursuing him for months, creating opportunities to spend time with him, positioning herself in his routine. I'm trying to understand if this is part of a larger pattern of behavior. Ashley was quiet for several minutes, staring into her wine glass as if it might contain answers to difficult questions. When she finally looked up, her expression was troubled. "There have been things," she said slowly. "Little things that didn't seem important individually, but now that you're asking, what kind of things?" Madison always volunteers to help organize events where she knows certain husbands will be present. She positions herself strategically at parties, always manages to end up in conversations with married men while their wives are busy elsewhere. And she asks a lot of questions about people's relationships, subtle probing that seems like friendly interest but feels invasive when you really think about it. Ashley tucked her legs under herself, settling in for what was clearly going to be a long conversation. "Remember Kevin's birthday party in February? His wife Lisa was sick, so Kevin came alone." Madison spent the entire evening attached to his side, laughing at everything he said, touching his arm constantly. It was inappropriate enough that Chloe and I talked about it afterward. "Why didn't anyone say anything to me?" "Because Madison is your best friend, and we didn't want to cause problems over what might have been innocent behavior. Besides, Kevin seemed uncomfortable with the attention, and nothing happened. We figured it was just Madison being Madison. You know how flirtatious she can be." I did know. Madison had always been naturally charming with men, comfortable with physical affection, and playful banter, in a way that I'd envied. But there was apparently a difference between being naturally charismatic and deliberately targeting specific individuals for pursuit. "Ashley, I need to know if you've heard anything about Madison's professional behavior. Jessica mentioned there might be rumors in the real estate community." Ashley's expression grew even more serious. "Okay, this is second-hand information, so take it with a grain of salt. But my neighbor works for Morrison Realty, and she mentioned that Madison has a reputation for being very hands-on with male clients, especially the wealthy ones going through divorces." "Hands-on how?" "Personal attention beyond what's professionally necessary. Late-night phone calls about properties, weekend meetings that could easily be scheduled during business hours, showing houses when she knows the client's wife won't be present. Nothing provably inappropriate, but enough to make other agents uncomfortable." Ashley leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And there was an incident last year at the annual real estate conference. Madison disappeared from the group dinner with someone's husband, claimed they were discussing investment opportunities. The wife found them in the hotel bar 2 hours later, sitting way too close and deep in what looked like intimate conversation. I felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, creating a picture that was both clearer and more disturbing than I'd imagined. Madison's pursuit of Ryan wasn't an isolated incident or even a recent development. It was part of an established pattern of behavior that had been quietly creating problems throughout the community for at least a year. Ashley, would you be willing to document what you've observed? Write down specific incidents, dates if you remember them, other witnesses who might have seen the same things. Of course. But Sarah, what are you planning to do with this information? I set down my wine glass and met her eyes directly. I'm going to make sure everyone in Cedar Falls knows exactly what Madison Brooks really is. I'm going to expose her pattern of targeting married men so thoroughly that no one will ever be naive enough to trust her around their husband again. Ashley nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her expression. You're not just defending your marriage, you're protecting every other marriage in town. Exactly. Madison sees other women's happiness as something she's entitled to take if she wants it badly enough. She's a predator, and predators only stop when they're exposed and face consequences for their actions. What do you need me to do? Write down everything you can remember about her inappropriate behavior. Talk to Chloe and see what she's observed. If you know anyone in the real estate community who might be willing to share information about her professional conduct, see if they'll talk to me. I'm building a comprehensive case, and I need multiple independent witnesses to establish credibility. Ashley reached for a notebook from her coffee table and began writing immediately. This explains so much about last night. I wondered why the party ended so abruptly. Why you looked like you'd seen a ghost when you told everyone to go home. I thought maybe someone had gotten too drunk or said something offensive. No, Just Madison showing her true colors in the most public way possible. At your anniversary party. Ashley shook her head in disgust. The audacity is breathtaking. She kissed your husband at the celebration of your marriage while pretending to be your closest friend. The timing wasn't accidental, I said grimly. She wanted maximum impact, maximum humiliation. She wanted to destroy our marriage publicly, so there would be no possibility of private reconciliation or quiet forgiveness. Ashley finished writing and tore the page from her notebook, handing it to me. There's probably more I'm forgetting, but that's everything I can remember off the top of my head. And Sarah? For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Someone needs to hold her accountable. I folded the page carefully and slipped it into my purse. Thank you. This means more than you know. Are you going to be okay? I mean, losing a 15-year friendship and having your marriage publicly attacked in the same night? That's a lot to process. I considered her question carefully. Was I okay? No, probably not. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd experienced before, leaving wounds that would take time to heal. But underneath the hurt and confusion, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Absolute clarity about who I was and what I was capable of when pushed too far. I will be, I said finally. Madison made a fundamental miscalculation when she decided to destroy my life. She assumed I would collapse under the weight of her betrayal, that I would be too hurt and confused to fight back effectively. She underestimated my capacity for strategic thinking when someone threatens everything I love. Ashley smiled grimly. She's about to learn that there are consequences for playing games with other people's lives. Yes, she is. I drove home through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of our wedding day. The town looked peaceful and innocent in the golden light, but I now understood that beneath the surface of small-town charm, predators moved freely among the trusting residents, leaving destruction in their wake. But not anymore. Not on my watch. Ryan was in the kitchen when I arrived home, surrounded by pages of handwritten notes and printed emails. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. I've been going through everything, he said, gesturing to the papers scattered across the table. Every text message Madison sent me, every email about house inspections, every time she called instead of texting. Sarah, it's worse than I thought. She was building a relationship with me that I didn't even realize was happening. I sat down beside him and began reading through his documentation. The pattern was even clearer, in written form. Madison, gradually escalating her contact with Ryan, moving from group communications to individual texts, from professional discussions to personal conversations, from brief interactions to extended meetings. She'd been slowly normalizing increasingly intimate contact, preparing him to accept her presence in his life as natural and welcome. This is exactly what I need, I said, organizing his notes into chronological order. Combined with what Ashley provided and what Tyler told us, we have a comprehensive picture of her methods and timeline. What happens next? I looked at my husband, this man who'd been targeted by a predator while trying to maintain politeness and respect for my friendship. He'd made mistakes in not confiding in me sooner, but his intentions had been good. Madison, on the other hand, had acted with calculated malice, using our trust and kindness as weapons against us. Next, we make sure Madison Brooks never hurts another family in Cedar Falls, I said quietly. And we make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what she is. Ryan nodded, understanding passing between us. We'd been victims of Madison's manipulation, but we weren't going to remain victims. Tomorrow, we would begin the process of exposing her for exactly what she was, a predator who destroyed marriages for sport and manipulated friendships for personal gain. Madison Brooks had wanted to kiss my life goodbye. Instead, she was about to discover that some people fight back when cornered, and that the quiet suburban housewife she'd targeted was capable of strategic warfare she'd never imagined. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only comes after a storm has passed, leaving the air clean and possibilities stretched wide open. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a steaming cup of coffee, and 3 manila folders containing the evidence I'd spent the weekend compiling. Ryan had left early for a job site across town, but not before squeezing my shoulder and whispering, "I'm proud of you for standing up to her." The first folder contained Madison's digital footprint, screenshots of social media posts, timestamps of check-ins, tagged photos that revealed her systematic insertion into Ryan's routine. The second held witness testimonies from Ashley, Chloe, Tyler, and 2 other friends who had come forward over the weekend with their own observations about Madison's behavior. The third contained professional documentation, records of complaints filed with Morrison Realty about Madison's conduct, testimonies from other real estate agents, and contact information for 3 married men who had experienced her inappropriate attention. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Madison's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. This was the 14th time she'd called since Saturday night, each message growing more desperate, more manipulative, more revealing of her true character. I played the latest voicemail on speaker while organizing my evidence files. "Sarah, please, you have to understand. I was drunk and emotional and missing Tyler, and Ryan was being so kind to me about the breakup. I know it looked bad, but it was just a moment of confusion. I would never intentionally hurt you. You're like a sister to me. Please don't destroy our friendship over one stupid mistake. Call me back, please." I deleted the message and opened my laptop. Madison's attempts at damage control were becoming increasingly frantic, as the silence from my end stretched longer. She tried calling Ryan's phone repeatedly as well, sent text messages to mutual friends asking if anyone knew why I was acting so strange, and even driven by our house twice over the weekend. Each action only confirmed what I already knew. Madison was spiraling because she'd lost control of the narrative. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called Eleanor Morrison, the owner of Morrison Realty and Madison's boss. Eleanor's voice was crisp and professional, the tone of someone who dealt with problems efficiently and without emotional investment. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for calling. I understand you have concerns about one of our agents. I have documented evidence that Madison Brooks has been engaging in inappropriate conduct with married clients and community members. I'd like to schedule a meeting to present this information formally." There was a pause, and when Eleanor spoke again, her voice carried a note of weary resignation. "Can you be here at 11 this morning? And Mrs. Mitchell, please bring everything you have. This isn't the first complaint we've received about Ms. Brooks." I arrived at Morrison Realty 15 minutes early, carrying my folders and wearing the navy suit I reserved for the most important client presentations. The building occupied a prime corner location on Main Street, its large windows displaying photos of available properties and success stories from satisfied customers. Madison's photos smiled from the wall of agents, her perfect hair and professional expression radiating competence and trustworthiness. Eleanor Morrison's office was spacious and elegant, with dark wood furniture and certificates covering one wall. Eleanor herself was probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a chignon and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She gestured for me to sit across from her massive desk and folded her hands expectantly. "I'm listening," she said simply. I opened the first folder and began presenting my evidence methodically, the same way I would pitch a major marketing campaign. Social media documentation showing Madison's pattern of inserting herself into my husband's routine. Witness testimonies describing her inappropriate behavior at community events. Tyler's account of her history targeting married men. Each piece of evidence built upon the previous one, creating an undeniable picture of predatory behavior. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and regarded me thoughtfully. "Mrs. Mitchell, what outcome are you seeking from this meeting?" "I want Madison Brooks held accountable for her actions. I want her behavior documented officially so that future victims have recourse. And I want assurance that she won't be representing your agency when she targets her next victim." Eleanor opened a desk drawer and withdrew a thick file folder. "Ms. Brooks has been with our agency for 3 years. In that time, we've received 7 formal complaints about her conduct with male clients. Each time, the complaints were withdrawn before formal action could be taken. Settlements were reached, non-disclosure agreements were signed, and Ms. Brooks received counseling about professional boundaries. 7 complaints. Madison had been systematically targeting married men for years, using her position as a real estate agent to gain access to vulnerable clients and create inappropriate relationships. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why wasn't she terminated? I asked. Because Ms. Brooks is very good at choosing her targets. Wealthy men going through divorces, out-of-town buyers whose wives aren't present during house hunting, recent widowers looking to downsize, men who have something to lose if their interactions with her become public knowledge, men who are willing to pay to make problems disappear quietly. Eleanor leaned forward, her expression intense. Mrs. Mitchell, you're the first person to come forward with comprehensive documentation and a willingness to see this through to completion. You're also the first person who has no financial incentive to drop the matter quietly. What does that mean for Madison? It means that as of this moment, Ms. Brooks is suspended pending a full investigation. It means that I will be forwarding your evidence to the State Real Estate Licensing Board for review. And it means that depending on what our investigation reveals, Ms. Brooks may find herself permanently barred from practicing real estate in Oregon. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with sadness. Madison's career, the professional identity she'd built so carefully, was crumbling because she couldn't resist targeting other women's husbands. But I also felt determined. Eleanor was right. I had no financial incentive to back down, no secrets Madison could use to silence me. I had only justice to pursue. There's something else, Eleanor continued. I've been waiting for someone like you to come forward because Ms. Brooks has been threatening other agents who've tried to report her behavior. She has information about their personal lives, their client relationships, their business practices. She's been using blackmail to protect herself. Blackmail? Nothing illegal, but certainly unethical. She gathers personal information about her colleagues and uses it to discourage them from filing formal complaints. It's created a climate of fear in our office that I've been powerless to address without concrete evidence. Eleanor stood and walked to her window, looking out at the busy street below. Mrs. Mitchell, if you're willing to go public with your allegations, I believe others will find the courage to come forward as well. Ms. Brooks has been operating with impunity for too long. I left Morrison Realty with Eleanor's assurance that a formal investigation would begin immediately, and that my evidence would be forwarded to the appropriate licensing authorities. But more importantly, I left with contact information for the 7 previous complainants and Eleanor's permission to reach out to them directly. The first call I made was to Jennifer Walsh, whose husband had hired Madison to sell their family home during their divorce proceedings 2 years earlier. Jennifer answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious when I explained who I was and why I was calling. I signed a non-disclosure agreement, she said immediately. I can't discuss what happened. I understand. But I'm not asking you to violate any legal obligations. I'm asking if you'd be willing to speak with Eleanor Morrison about your experience. There's an active investigation, and your testimony could help protect other families. There was a long pause before Jennifer spoke again. She destroyed my marriage. My husband and I were having problems, but Madison manipulated the situation to her advantage. She convinced him that I was being unreasonable about the divorce settlement, that I was trying to take advantage of his emotional state. She positioned herself as his advocate and ally while actively working against any possibility of reconciliation. I'm sorry that happened to you. The worst part is that she made my husband believe he was in love with her. She made him think their relationship was real, that to play the victim had only served to validate the allegations against her. That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Linda Rodriguez with the Cedar Falls Police Department. Her voice was professional but warm, the tone of someone who dealt with difficult situations regularly but still maintained empathy for the people involved. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you filed a complaint about harassment and stalking behavior. I'd like to schedule a time to take your formal statement. Is this about Madison Brooks? Among other things, yes. We've received multiple complaints about Ms. Brooks' behavior over the past week. Your situation appears to be part of a larger pattern that warrants investigation. I met with Detective Rodriguez Friday morning at the police station, a modern building that managed to feel both official and welcoming. Detective Rodriguez was probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who specialized in cases involving domestic disputes and harassment. "Tell me about your relationship with Ms. Brooks and what led to your complaint," she said, opening a recording device and setting it between us. I walked through the entire story methodically: the 15-year friendship, Madison's pursuit of Ryan, the kiss at our anniversary party, the evidence I'd uncovered about her pattern of targeting married men. Detective Rodriguez listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and witnesses. "Mrs. Mitchell, based on what you've told me and the other complaints we've received, it appears that Ms. Brooks has been engaged in a pattern of stalking and harassment that extends beyond your situation. We're opening a formal investigation." "What does that mean?" "It means we'll be interviewing all the parties involved, examining the evidence you've provided, and determining whether criminal charges are appropriate. It also means that Ms. Brooks will be formally notified that her behavior is under investigation and warned to cease all contact with you and your husband." That afternoon, 2 police officers visited Madison at her apartment downtown. According to the incident report I received later, Madison became hysterical when informed of the investigation, alternately denying any wrongdoing and demanding to know who had filed complaints against her. She was formally warned to have no contact with Ryan or me, and informed that violation of the no-contact order would result in immediate arrest. Madison's response to the police visit was swift and predictable. She hired an attorney and immediately began claiming that she was the victim of a coordinated harassment campaign designed to destroy her reputation and career. Her lawyer sent cease-and-desist letters to Eleanor Morrison, Detective Rodriguez, and me, demanding that all investigations be dropped and threatening legal action for defamation. But Madison's legal threats came too late. The investigation had gained momentum beyond anything her attorney could stop. On Monday morning, the State Real Estate Licensing Board formally suspended her license pending completion of their investigation. Morrison Realty terminated her employment and issued a public statement distancing themselves from her conduct. 3 of her former clients filed formal complaints with the State Consumer Protection Agency. More importantly, Madison's attempts to intimidate witnesses had backfired completely. Women throughout Cedar Falls began coming forward with their own stories about her inappropriate behavior. The pattern that emerged was consistent and damning. Madison systematically targeted married men, used her professional position to gain access to vulnerable clients, and manipulated social situations to create opportunities for inappropriate relationships. By Tuesday, the local newspaper, the Cedar Falls Gazette, ran a front-page story about the investigation. The headline read, "Local Real Estate Agent Under Investigation for Professional Misconduct." The article detailed the complaints against Madison while carefully avoiding specific allegations that might compromise the ongoing investigation. The newspaper story was the final nail in Madison's reputation. Cedar Falls was a small community where everyone knew everyone, and the public exposure of her behavior sent shockwaves through the tight-knit social networks she'd spent years cultivating. Real estate colleagues distanced themselves from her. Social groups quietly removed her from membership lists. Even the coffee shop where she'd held many of her inappropriate client meetings posted a discreet sign stating that business meetings were limited to regular hours and proper supervision. Wednesday brought the call I'd been waiting for. Eleanor Morrison's voice was satisfied when she delivered the news. "Mrs. Mitchell, I wanted to update you on our investigation. The State Licensing Board has found sufficient evidence to permanently revoke Ms. Brooks' real estate license. She's also been referred to the State Attorney General's office for potential criminal charges related to fraud and extortion." Extortion? It appears that Ms. Brooks was blackmailing some of her male clients using intimate information gathered during their interactions to demand favorable treatment in real estate transactions. The evidence is quite damning. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, looking out at the backyard where string lights still hung between the trees. It had been exactly 1 week since our anniversary party, 1 week since Madison had kissed my husband and shattered the illusion of 15 years of friendship. In that week, her entire professional life had collapsed, Her reputation in the community was destroyed, and she was facing potential criminal charges. But as I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt tired and sad and oddly empty. Madison had brought this destruction on herself through years of predatory behavior, but it was still painful to watch someone I'd once loved destroy themselves so completely. Ryan came home that evening to find me sitting in our backyard, finally ready to take down the anniversary party decorations. He joined me on the patio, and we worked together in comfortable silence, removing string lights and folding the tablecloth we'd used for our celebration. "Eleanor Morrison called today," I told him as we gathered the last of the decorations. "Madison's lost her real estate license permanently. She's facing criminal charges." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "How do you feel about that?" I considered his question carefully. "I feel like justice has been served. Not just for us, but for all the families she hurt over the years. And I feel like Cedar Falls is a safer place for married couples now that everyone knows what she's capable of." And Madison? Madison made her choices. She chose to target married men for years. She chose to use her position to manipulate vulnerable clients. She chose to kiss my husband at our anniversary party. Every consequence she's facing now is the direct result of decisions she made. I didn't destroy her life. She destroyed it herself. That night, as we prepared for bed in the house that had witnessed both our celebration and Madison's betrayal, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a week: peace. The woman who had tried to destroy my marriage was facing the consequences of her actions. The community that had unknowingly harbored a predator was now protected by her exposure. And my marriage, tested by betrayal and manipulation, had emerged stronger and more honest than before. Madison Brooks had wanted to kiss my life goodbye. Instead, she had kissed her own life goodbye while I watched from a position of strength and strategic superiority. Some battles are won not through aggression but through patience, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to truth. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply allowing someone to face the natural consequences of their own choices. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our remodeled house, morning sunlight streaming through the new windows we'd installed where the old sliding glass door used to be. The backyard looked completely different now, transformed from the scene of our anniversary party disaster into something fresh and hopeful. We'd torn down the old deck, planted new flower beds, and replaced the string light setup with elegant solar lanterns that created a gentle glow without carrying the weight of painful memories. The coffee maker gurgled contentedly as I prepared for another day at my expanded design business. In the weeks following Madison's exposure and downfall, word had spread throughout Cedar Falls about my role in bringing her predatory behavior to light. Instead of the social ostracism I'd feared, I'd been flooded with support from women who'd felt isolated by their own experiences with Madison's manipulation. More surprisingly, I'd received dozens of new client inquiries from people who admired my strategic thinking and attention to detail in handling the situation. Pixel and Print had evolved into Mitchell Design Solutions, operating out of a renovated storefront downtown that I'd purchased with the insurance settlement from Madison's harassment case. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison's actions had ultimately led to the expansion of my business and my financial independence. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about justice. Ryan emerged from the bathroom, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing the new navy polo I'd bought him last week. Our relationship had undergone its own transformation in the months since the anniversary party. The forced honesty that came from Madison's betrayal had created space for conversations we'd been avoiding for years. We'd attended couples counseling, not because our marriage was broken, but because we wanted to build something stronger from the foundation that Madison had tried to crack. "Big day today?" he asked, kissing my cheek as he reached for his travel mug. "The Henderson account presentation is this afternoon, and I'm interviewing a potential new employee this morning. Ashley Rodriguez is thinking about leaving marketing to join my team full-time." "That's fantastic. You two work well together." It was true. Ashley had been instrumental in helping me document Madison's behavior, and our professional collaboration during that crisis had revealed a natural creative partnership. She brought marketing expertise that complemented my design skills, and together we'd been building something that felt both profitable and personally fulfilling. What about you? Another exciting day of teaching contractors about proper foundation techniques? Ryan laughed, the sound warm and genuine in our bright kitchen. Actually, I'm meeting with the city planning committee about the new community center project. If we get the contract, it could keep the crew busy through next spring. We'd learn to celebrate these small victories together, to share the mundane details of our daily lives in ways we'd forgotten to do before Madison's betrayal reminded us how precious ordinary happiness could be. There was something to be said for almost losing something before you realized how much it meant to you. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. Coffee later? I have news about the teaching position. Jessica had applied for a principal position at the elementary school, motivated partly by watching me take control of my professional life after years of comfortable stagnation. Madison's destructive influence had created ripple effects throughout our social circle, but many of those ripples had ultimately been positive, inspiring people to examine their own lives and make changes they'd been postponing. I was arranging client files when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a woman I didn't recognize standing on our front porch, her posture uncertain and apologetic. She appeared to be in her 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and the tired expression of someone who'd been dealing with stress for too long. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" she asked when I opened the door. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Karen Phillips. I live over in Riverside Heights, about 20 minutes from here. I was hoping I could talk to you about Madison Brooks." I'd received several similar visits over the past few months. Women from neighboring communities who'd heard about Madison's exposure and wanted to share their own experiences or seek advice about similar situations. Each conversation had reinforced my understanding that predatory behavior like Madison's was more common than most people realized, and that victims often felt isolated and powerless when facing someone skilled at manipulation. "Please, come in," I said, leading Karen to the living room we'd redecorated after the anniversary party. The new furniture was comfortable and welcoming, chosen specifically to create a space where difficult conversations could happen safely. Karen accepted my offer of coffee and settled into the armchair across from me, clutching her mug like a lifeline. "I'm not sure where to start," she said. "Start wherever feels comfortable," I replied, using the same tone I'd learned from the counselor Ryan and I had been seeing. "There's no rush." Madison was my real estate agent 2 years ago when my husband and I were buying our first house. At first, everything seemed normal. She was professional, knowledgeable, helpful with all the paperwork and negotiations, but then she started calling my husband directly instead of going through me, even though I was the one who'd initiated contact with her. The familiar pattern was already emerging. I listened without interruption as Karen described Madison's gradual insertion into her family's life, the manufactured emergencies that required private meetings with her husband, the slow erosion of trust between Karen and her spouse as Madison positioned herself as his advocate and ally. She convinced my husband that I was being too picky about houses, too demanding about inspections and repairs. She made him feel like I was sabotaging our home buying process, and he started excluding me from meetings with her. By the time we closed on the house, Madison knew more about my husband's preferences and concerns than I did. "What happened after the house purchase?" Karen's hands tightened around her coffee mug. She continued calling him. Said she wanted to make sure we were happy with the house, that there weren't any problems we needed help addressing. But the calls became more frequent, more personal. She started asking about our marriage, whether we were planning to have children, if we needed any other real estate services. "How did your husband respond?" "He was flattered by the attention. Madison has a way of making men feel special, like they're the most interesting person she's ever met." She remembered details about his hobbies, his work, his opinions about everything. I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. I recognized the tactics. Madison's predatory behavior followed a consistent script. Establish professional contact. Create private communication channels. Gradually increase personal intimacy. Isolate the target from his spouse. And finally make her move when the man felt emotionally dependent on her attention. Did anything physical happen between them? Not exactly, but Madison started inviting my husband to real estate events as her guest, saying he'd enjoy meeting other property investors. She suggested he help her with home renovations for clients, claiming she valued his handyman skills. She even offered him a part-time job showing houses to male buyers, who might relate better to a man's perspective. Karen set down her coffee and looked directly at me. I knew what was happening, but I couldn't prove it. When I tried to talk to my husband about Madison's behavior, he accused me of being jealous and insecure. He said I was imagining things, that Madison was just being friendly and professional. I started feeling crazy, like maybe I was overreacting to innocent interactions. This was the most insidious aspect of Madison's manipulation. She was skilled at making her targets feel like willing participants, while simultaneously making their wives feel paranoid and controlling. The gaslighting was just as damaging as the pursuit itself. What finally made you realize you weren't imagining things? Madison made a mistake. She sent a text message intended for my husband to me instead. It was intimate, suggestive. It referenced private conversations they'd been having about our marriage problems. Conversations I didn't even know were happening. Karen reached into her purse and pulled out a printed screenshot. I confronted my husband with this, and he finally admitted that Madison had been pursuing him for months. He said he'd been trying to discourage her without hurting her feelings, but that she'd been very persistent. He claimed nothing physical had happened, but the emotional affair had been going on for almost a year. I studied the text message, recognizing Madison's manipulative style even in the brief digital exchange. She had a talent for creating intimacy through shared secrets and manufactured crises, making her targets feel like she was the only person who truly understood them. "Are you still married?" I asked gently. "We're in counseling. It's been difficult, but we're working through it." My husband finally understands how Madison manipulated both of us, how she used our marriage problems to create opportunities for herself. But the trust we lost, that's taking time to rebuild. Karen leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I wanted to thank you for exposing her behavior. When I read about the investigation in the newspaper, I felt such relief. Finally, someone had the courage to hold her accountable. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, I wasn't imagining things." "You were never any of those things," I assured her. Madison was a predator who specialized in making her victims feel isolated and confused. You protected your marriage by trusting your instincts, even when everyone around you was telling you to ignore them. Have you heard from other women with similar experiences? Many, I replied honestly. Madison's pattern of behavior was extensive and consistent. You're not alone in what you experienced, and your marriage isn't the only one she tried to destroy. The good news is that her real estate license has been permanently revoked, and she's facing criminal charges in multiple counties. She won't be able to use her professional position to target vulnerable families anymore. Karen nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I know it sounds strange, but I actually feel sorry for her sometimes. She must be so unhappy with her own life to spend so much energy trying to steal other people's happiness. It didn't sound strange at all. I'd had similar thoughts about Madison over the past few months, moments of sadness for the person she might have been if she'd chosen different paths. But I'd learned to separate sympathy from responsibility. Madison's unhappiness didn't excuse her choices to hurt others, and feeling sorry for her didn't mean she should escape consequences for her actions. Empathy is a sign of emotional health, I told Karen. The fact that you can feel compassion for someone who hurt you shows that you haven't let her poison your ability to trust and care about others. That's a victory she can't take away from you. After Karen left, I sat in my renovated living room and reflected on how many similar conversations I'd had over the past few months. Women who'd felt isolated by Madison's manipulation, couples working to rebuild trust after her interference, families learning to heal from the damage she'd caused. Each story reinforced my understanding that exposing Madison's behavior had been about more than personal vindication. It had been about protecting an entire community from a predator. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Is this Sarah Mitchell, the woman who exposed Madison Brooks? Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Detective Susan Harris from the Portland Police Department. We're investigating complaints against Ms. Brooks related to fraud and stalking charges in our jurisdiction. I was hoping you might be willing to provide testimony about her pattern of behavior. It turned out that Madison's predatory activities hadn't been limited to Cedar Falls. After losing her real estate license, she'd moved to Portland and attempted to restart her career with a different agency. But her behavior had quickly resumed, and within weeks she was targeting married clients and creating the same pattern of manipulation and harassment that had defined her approach in our community. Ms. Brooks is currently facing charges in 3 counties, Detective Harris explained. Your documentation of her behavior in Cedar Falls has been instrumental in establishing the pattern evidence we need for prosecution. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to trial? Absolutely, I replied without hesitation. Madison needs to face consequences for all the families she's hurt, not just mine. That afternoon, I drove to the Hideaway Cafe for my coffee date with Jessica. The familiar yellow facade looked cheerful in the autumn sunlight, and the interior buzzed with the comfortable energy of a community gathering place. Jessica had claimed our usual table in the back corner, her expression radiating excitement and satisfaction. You got the principal position, I said, reading her face before she could speak. I did. They announced it this morning. Sarah, I'm going to be running Oakwood Elementary starting in January. I hugged my sister across the small table, genuinely thrilled by her success. Jessica had been an exceptional teacher for years, but watching me take control of my professional life had inspired her to pursue leadership opportunities she'd been considering for too long. I'm so proud of you, you're going to be amazing. I keep thinking about that night at your anniversary party, how everything seemed to fall apart so quickly. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could happen. But look at us now. You're running a successful business, I'm going to be a principal, Ryan's company got that community center contract. It's like Madison's betrayal cleared the way for all of us to become who we were meant to be. Jessica's observation was more profound than she probably realized. Madison's destructive behavior had certainly caused pain and upheaval, but it had also created opportunities for growth and change that might never have emerged otherwise. Sometimes the worst experiences of our lives became catalysts for the best transformations. Speaking of transformations, Jessica continued, have you heard anything about Madison lately? She's facing criminal charges in Portland now. Apparently, she tried to resume her old behavior with a new real estate agency, but this time there were people willing to hold her accountable immediately instead of suffering in silence for months. Good. She needs to face consequences for all the damage she's caused. I agreed, but I also felt something that surprised me. Relief that Madison was finally getting help, even if it was being forced on her through the legal system. The criminal charges meant she would likely be required to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling, interventions that might help her understand why she felt compelled to destroy other people's relationships. Have you thought about what you'll say if she tries to contact you again? Jessica asked. She can't contact me. There's a permanent restraining order in place. If she violates it, she'll be arrested immediately. The restraining order had been granted after the police investigation revealed the extent of Madison's harassment and stalking behavior. It covered not just direct contact, but also any attempts to communicate through third parties or social media. Madison was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Ryan or me, our home or my business. But if she could contact you, hypothetically, what would you want to say to her? I considered Jessica's question carefully. There had been times over the past few months when I'd imagined confronting Madison directly, telling her exactly what I thought of her behavior and its impact on innocent families. But as my anger had cooled and my life had stabilized, those fantasies had been replaced by something more complex. I think I'd want her to understand that her actions had consequences beyond what she intended, I said finally. She tried to destroy my marriage, but instead she strengthened it. She tried to ruin my reputation, but instead she enhanced it. She tried to isolate me from my community, But instead she connected me with other victims who needed support. Every destructive thing she attempted backfired and ultimately made my life better. That must be frustrating for someone like her. I hope it's educational. I hope she learns that you can't build happiness by stealing it from other people. Real satisfaction comes from creating your own success, not from destroying someone else's. Jessica smiled. Look at you, being all wise and philosophical. Madison really did awaken something powerful in you. She was right. The person I'd become, in the months since our anniversary party, was stronger, more confident, and more self-aware than the woman who'd planned that celebration with such innocent trust. Madison's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been illuminating, revealing capabilities and resilience I'd never known I possessed. That evening, Ryan and I walked through Riverside Park as the autumn sun set behind the mountains. The trees were dressed in brilliant orange and gold, and the air carried the crisp promise of winter approaching. We'd developed this routine over the past few months, these quiet walks that gave us time to reconnect without the distractions of work and household responsibilities. Karen Phillips came by today, I told him as we followed the familiar path along the river. Another Madison victim from Riverside Heights. How is she handling everything? Better than she was a year ago. Her marriage survived and she's learned to trust her instincts again. She wanted to thank me for exposing Madison's behavior. Ryan was quiet for several minutes, watching the water flow past rocks worn smooth by decades of current. Do you ever regret it? All the upheaval, the investigation, the public attention? I considered his question seriously. The past few months had certainly been challenging, involving police interviews, legal testimonies, media attention, and constant reminders of Madison's betrayal. There had been times when I'd wondered if pursuing justice was worth the emotional toll it was taking on our family. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Madison made a choice to hurt people for her own gratification, and she needed to face consequences for that choice. If I hadn't held her accountable, how many other families would she have destroyed? How many other women would have felt crazy and isolated while she manipulated their husbands? You saved a lot of marriages by exposing her. Maybe. Or maybe I just made it harder for her to destroy them in the future. Either way, it was the right thing to do. We reached our favorite bench overlooking the river, and I settled beside Ryan to watch the last light fade from the sky. This spot had become symbolic for us, a place where we came to process difficult emotions and celebrate small victories. Tonight, it felt like a place to acknowledge how far we'd traveled from the people we'd been 6 months ago. I have something for you, Ryan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box, the kind that usually contained jewelry. My heart skipped a beat as memories of our anniversary party flooded back. But these were different emotions now. Anticipation instead of dread. Trust instead of betrayal. It's not our anniversary, I pointed out. No, but it's the anniversary of when you decided to fight back instead of accepting being a victim. I wanted to mark that transformation. I unwrapped the box carefully, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like a phoenix. The symbolism was perfect, a creature that rises from its own ashes, transformed and strengthened by the fire that tried to destroy it. Ryan, it's beautiful. I had it engraved, he said, helping me fasten the clasp around my neck. I lifted the pendant to read the tiny inscription. From ashes, wings. The simple phrase captured everything about our journey, from Madison's betrayal to our current strength and happiness. We'd been burned by her manipulation and lies. But we'd risen from that destruction as better people, with a stronger marriage and clearer understanding of our own resilience. Thank you, I whispered, touching the pendant gently. It's perfect. As we walked home through the gathering darkness, I reflected on the woman I'd become. Since that devastating night in our kitchen, Madison's kiss had been intended as an ending. The end of my marriage, my trust, my happiness. Instead, it had been a beginning. The beginning of my understanding that I was capable of strategic thinking under pressure. The beginning of my recognition that I deserved relationships built on honesty and respect. The beginning of my awareness that sometimes protecting yourself requires fighting back against people who count on your passivity. The house looked welcoming as we approached, warm light glowing from the windows we'd replaced, and the garden we'd redesigned. This was still the same physical space where Madison had tried to destroy our marriage, but we'd transformed it into something that reflected our growth and healing. The past existed here, but it no longer defined the present. Inside, I made tea while Ryan sorted through the day's mail. The domestic routine felt precious and significant, a reminder that ordinary happiness was something worth protecting fiercely. Madison had tried to steal this simple contentment, but she'd only succeeded in making us more grateful for it. "There's a letter for you from the district attorney's office," Ryan said, handing me an official-looking envelope. I opened it carefully, reading the formal notification that Madison's case was proceeding to trial and that my testimony would be required. The letter included a date 6 weeks in the future and contact information for the prosecutor handling the case. "One more step in the process," I said, showing Ryan the letter. "Are you ready for it?" "I'm ready for it to be over," I replied honestly. "But yes, I'm ready to testify. Madison needs to face accountability for all the families she's hurt, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens." That night, as I prepared for bed in the master bedroom we'd redecorated after the anniversary party, I caught sight of myself in the mirror we'd hung on the opposite wall. The woman looking back at me was familiar but changed. The same brown hair and green eyes, but with a confidence and strength that hadn't been there 6 months ago. The phoenix pendant caught the lamplight, a tangible reminder of transformation and resilience. I thought about Madison, probably lying awake somewhere in Portland, facing criminal charges and professional ruin, her life in shambles because of choices she'd made over years of predatory behavior. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part felt satisfied that justice was finally being served. She'd spent years counting on other people's silence and shame to protect her from consequences. Now she was learning that some people refused to be silenced. 6 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom in downtown Portland, wearing my best navy suit and the phoenix pendant Ryan had given me. The prosecutor, a competent woman in her 40s named Jennifer Walsh, had prepared me thoroughly for my testimony. The evidence against Madison was overwhelming. Not just my documentation, but similar accounts from victims in 3 counties, financial records showing fraudulent activities, and phone records establishing patterns of harassment and stalking. Madison sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a conservative gray suit that seemed designed to project vulnerability rather than confidence. She didn't look at me during my testimony, keeping her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. I spoke clearly and calmly about Madison's pursuit of Ryan, the systematic nature of her behavior, and the impact her actions had on our marriage and community. I presented the timeline I'd compiled, the social media evidence I'd gathered, and the witness testimonies I'd collected. When the defense attorney tried to characterize my response as vindictive overreaction, I calmly explained that holding someone accountable for predatory behavior was not vindictiveness. It was protection of future victims. The trial lasted 3 days. Victim after victim testified about Madison's manipulation and harassment. Real estate colleagues described her unprofessional conduct and, "Tell them the party's over," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "Tell them whatever you want. I'm going upstairs." I walked out of the kitchen without looking back, leaving Ryan to face our friends and their inevitable questions. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I could hear the murmur of confused voices, the shuffle of people gathering their things, the awkward goodbyes of a celebration that had ended in inexplicable disaster. In the sanctuary of our bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My best friend had kissed my husband. In my house. At my anniversary party. While I stood 3 feet away. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't find the bottom of it. But underneath the hurt, underneath the shock and disbelief, something else was growing. Something cold and calculating and utterly unforgiving. Madison wanted to destroy my marriage, my happiness, my life. Fine. But if she thought I was going to collapse and disappear quietly, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. I walked to my dresser and pulled out my laptop, my fingers surprisingly steady as I opened it. If Madison thought she could kiss my life goodbye with that stunt downstairs, she was about to discover that I could return the favor with interest. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And Madison had just sprinted across the most sacred one of all. Sleep was impossible. I lay in the darkness of our bedroom, staring at the ceiling while Ryan's breathing gradually deepened beside me. He'd tried to talk when he finally came upstairs, his voice raw with exhaustion and confusion, but I'd turned away from him, pulling the covers up to my chin like armor. What was there to say? What words could possibly address the crater that had opened up in the center of my life? The digital clock on the nightstand glowed accusingly, 2:47 a.m. Outside, Cedar Falls had settled into the deep quiet of a small-town night, broken only by the occasional car passing on our street, and the distant hum of the highway that connected us to the larger world beyond. The remnants of our anniversary party lingered in the air, the faint smell of barbecue smoke drifting through the open window, the memory of laughter that now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. I slipped out of bed carefully, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Ryan didn't stir. The events of the evening had drained him too, left him looking older somehow, the lines around his eyes more pronounced when he'd finally fallen asleep. Whether from guilt or shock, I couldn't tell anymore. The certainty I'd felt about my husband, about my marriage, had evaporated the moment Madison's lips touched his. Downstairs, the kitchen still bore traces of our celebration. I'd managed to load most of the dishes into the dishwasher before retreating upstairs, but wine glasses sat abandoned on the counter, and the anniversary cake remained half-eaten on its crystal stand. The string lights in the backyard cast soft geometric patterns through the sliding glass door, creating shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits. I made coffee despite the late hour, needing something to do with my hands, something normal and routine to anchor me while my mind spun in chaotic circles. The familiar ritual of measuring grounds and adding water felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else go through the motions of domestic life while my own world lay in ruins. As the coffee maker gurgled to life, I found myself staring at my phone, Madison's contact information glowing on the screen. 15 years of friendship condensed into a digital record. Thousands of text messages, shared photos, inside jokes, late-night conversations about everything and nothing. My thumb hovered over her name, muscle memory almost strong enough to overcome rational thought. How many times had I called her after a fight with Ryan, seeking comfort and perspective? How many times had she been the first person I wanted to share good news with? But tonight, looking at her name on my phone felt like staring at a stranger. Madison Brooks, real estate agent. When had she become so formal in my contacts? I remembered now. She'd insisted I update her information when she'd gotten her license, claiming it was important for her professional image. Such a small thing, but now it felt symbolic somehow, as if she'd been creating distance between us long before tonight. The coffee finished brewing and I poured myself a mug, the steam rising like incense in the quiet kitchen. My laptop sat on the counter where I'd left it earlier, and almost without conscious thought, I opened it and navigated to Facebook. Madison's profile appeared immediately, her smiling face looking back at me from the profile picture we'd taken together at last year's wine festival. We looked so happy, arms wrapped around each other, faces flushed with laughter and celebration. When had that picture been taken? September, maybe? Just a few months after. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Last summer's neighborhood barbecue at the Hendersons' house. I'd been called into work unexpectedly, a client emergency that couldn't wait until Monday. Ryan had gone without me, and Madison had offered to keep him company since Tyler was out of town on business. I'd been grateful at the time, touched that my best friend would sacrifice her Saturday evening to make sure my husband didn't feel awkward at a couples event. But now, scrolling through Madison's photos from that night, I saw things I'd missed before. There was Ryan in the background of several shots, and in every single one, Madison was positioned near him. Not obviously, not in a way that would have raised immediate red flags, but consistently, subtly. In one photo, taken by someone else and tagged later, Madison's hand rested on Ryan's shoulder as they shared some joke. Her body language was relaxed, familiar, intimate in a way that I'd dismissed as normal friendship at the time. I scrolled further back, my coffee growing cold as I traveled through months of social media history. The Henderson barbecue wasn't an isolated incident. There was the photo from Ashley's birthday party in March, where Madison and Ryan were caught in animated conversation in the corner while I'd been helping with cleanup. The group shot from our Valentine's Day dinner at Romano's. where Madison had somehow ended up seated directly across from Ryan despite the fact that she'd been the last to arrive. The casual snapshot from our New Year's Eve gathering, where Madison's gaze was fixed not on the camera but on my husband. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind to what was happening right in front of me? I opened a new browser tab and logged into my Instagram account, driven by a need to dig deeper, to understand the scope of what I'd failed to see. Madison's posts from the past year told a story I'd been too trusting to read properly. There were subtle changes in her content, a shift from the typical real estate promotional posts and friend group photos to more personal, almost intimate glimpses of her life. Photos of coffee shops where she and Ryan had discussed that Elm Street house. Pictures of hiking trails they'd both mentioned visiting. Even a shot of her reading the same book Ryan had recommended to me just last month. My hands trembled as I clicked through post after post, each one adding another piece to a puzzle I'd never realized existed. There was a check-in at Murphy's Hardware from 3 weeks ago, the same day Ryan had gone there to buy supplies for our backyard lighting project. A photo of her lunch at the construction site cafe where Ryan's crew often ate, posted the same day he'd mentioned running into her during his break. Even a picture of her car at the grocery store, where Ryan always stopped after work, captioned with some joke about weekend errands. The coffee in my mug had gone stone cold, but I couldn't stop scrolling, couldn't stop connecting dots that painted a picture of systematic, deliberate pursuit. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or a sudden attraction that had overwhelmed better judgment. This was a campaign. I closed the laptop with shaking hands and sat in the darkness, letting the weight of my discovery settle over me like a heavy blanket. Madison hadn't just kissed my husband at our anniversary party. She'd been circling him for months, creating opportunities for connection, building intimacy through shared spaces and manufactured coincidences. The kiss wasn't the beginning of her betrayal. It was the culmination of it. My phone buzzed against the counter, the sound sharp and startling in the quiet kitchen. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Madison, finally ready to offer the explanation she'd promised in those frantic moments after the kiss. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. I saw what happened tonight. We need to talk. Tyler Grant, Madison's most recent ex-boyfriend, the one who'd been at the party earlier, charming and friendly as always. Why was he texting me at 3 in the morning? And what did he mean? He'd seen what happened. The kiss had occurred inside the house, away from the other guests. I stared at the message for several minutes before typing back, "What do you mean?" His response came quickly, as if he'd been waiting by his phone. Not over text. "Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? There are things you need to know about Madison. Things I should have told you months. New memories to create with Ryan in our transformed home." But tonight I felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought us here and excitement for the future we were building together. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, loving deeply, and refusing to let someone else's darkness dim your own light. The woman who had planned an anniversary party with such innocent trust was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable of protecting the happiness she'd fought so hard to reclaim. And that transformation, born from betrayal but nurtured by courage and determination, was worth every difficult moment it had taken to achieve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.